Nintendo president Shuntaro Furukawa has come out and declared that the Switch 2 is not coming out in 2024. We have hard confirmation for it. There's no denying it anymore. A lot of people have been skirting around this. Oh, maybe they're lying. No. Like, we have pretty hard confirmation at this point that the Switch 2 is not coming out in 2024. So, of course, the Pretendo YouTubers are scrambling. They're trying to find excuses for this. They're trying to come to some kind of realization. They're trying to find some kind of excuse. But the reality is that the Nintendo Switch and the Joy-Cons are here to stay, assuming I don't drop them. The Joy-Cons are here to stay, right? Joy-Con boys forever, you could say. And what that means, essentially, is that within the next 2 years, since the Switch is not being replaced, it is going to eclipse the PS2 and go on to be the highest selling console of all time. It is going to get new exciting games for the foreseeable future, and it is going to outperform the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. The reason that the industry was so adamant that the Nintendo Switch was going to get replaced this year, earlier this year, it was, Tears of the Kingdom would be the final game on the Switch. I think, like, last year, it was, like, Metroid Prime 4, and Tears of the Kingdom would come out on the next console or something. Like, they're always, like, trying to act as if the Switch is on its last legs and it's, like, on the way out or whatever. But people don't understand that there are hundreds, thousands of great games to play on the Nintendo Switch. Like, people aren't just, like, anticipating the release of Zelda. They're playing other games. Games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, New Super Mario Bros. U, like Splatoon 3. Like, a lot of that stuff has done extraordinarily well over the past year, right? Like, these games are still selling. And there is absolutely no reason to replace the console when it has no competition. Like, that is the thing that nobody wants to admit when people were bringing up, like, oh, the 6 years are up, they need to replace it now. No. Like, the Switch is dominant in its niche, right? It is dominant when it comes to, like, the handheld console hybrid thing. Like, when you compare the Switch's popularity with something like inferior, like the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally or like an iPad, like, the Switch is just objectively superior from the gaming standpoint, right? If you're a hardcore gamer, the Switch is a must-buy, right? There's no disputing this, right? The Switch has the most variety. It's the most accessible console. It's affordable. It has all these amazing games on it. Like, why exactly would you not want a Switch? Right? And the reality is that for the longest time, people have been screaming about the power scale. Even before the console came out, they were doing this, screaming about the console's alleged lack of power, screaming about the visuals, screaming about the rehashed IPs. And none of it is stuck, right? This is stuff we've been hearing for years now. People insisting that the console is, like, going to be replaced because it can't compete. But the reality is that PlayStation, Xbox, iPhones, Steam, PC gaming as a whole, like, they can't compete with what Nintendo is doing, right? Nintendo is dominant in the gaming niche. They control the market. They essentially have a monopoly. And we are in this phase where people don't want to admit just how dominant they are, just how good these games are. Just look at what happened with Tears of the Kingdom, right? Sold 20 million units, well, 19.5 million in, like, less than 6 months, right? Huge numbers, right? That's far outpacing Elden Ring. It's far outpacing, like, what Breath of the Wild did when the Switch came out. It's far outpacing, like, Baldur's Gate 3, obviously. It's far outpacing, like, it sold more than Hogwarts Legacy, I believe. Like, it's a huge deal, right? Tears of the Kingdom is a phenomenon, and yet you're seeing people come out trying to say that, like, it's not popular, it's not talked about, it's not that good of a game, when it clearly is. Like, it's embarrassing the lengths that people have gone to downplay that. Tears of the Kingdom have gone to downplay Fire Emblem Engage. Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I remember when people were saying Super Mario Bros. Wonder would be a bomb. And here we are seeing the first launch window numbers here, and it sold like what, like a third of the amount that like New Super Mario Bros. U has done on Switch in like the first 2 weeks, right? Like it's doing extraordinarily well. Will continue to do extraordinarily well into the future, and we're gonna get more games, right? Like I have so many games on Switch, I can't even keep track of them all, right? Like if I could stop watching Cobra Kai for 5 seconds, maybe I could play some of them, but like when you when you look at like the reality of what's going on here, you're seeing these games, games that people insist were failures do exceptionally well. Skyward Sword HD is my go-to example. So many people wrote off Skyward Sword when it first came out. Oh, it can't compete with Skyrim. Oh, it can't compete with Dark Souls. Well, what happens? Breath of the Wild comes out, outsells, becomes one of the most critically acclaimed game of all time. Considered the best game ever made. Huge deal, right? And people buy Skyward Sword. They become fans of Skyward Sword. They start playing other Zelda games like Link's Awakening. They branch out into stuff like A Link to the Past, Ocarina, Majora's Mask, and then suddenly we have a bunch more Zelda fans, right? This is clearly there's a number of Nintendo franchises it feels like where we're seeing like a major renaissance, right, in popularity, right? Because 10 years ago, people used to say that like Zelda couldn't compete with modern games, and now it's the other way around. Like other games can't compete with Zelda, right? The difference is that like no Zelda's like irrelevancy 10 years ago was always greatly exaggerated, and now that it's dominant, now that it's in a position where like no other developer can possibly compete with it, not Bethesda, not Rockstar, not Larian, all right? No other dev can even come close to managing what Zelda is accomplishing. Like we're in this position where uh, people are just in denial about how good the Switch actually is. And this is going to continue, I think, for the entire life cycle. And again, much like Tears of the Kingdom, once the next console comes out, oh, the Switch was the best ever. Oh, this new console doesn't live up to the legacy. It's the same thing we see over and over again from these people. Like, why can we not just admit the Nintendo Switch is a great gaming platform? Why can we not admit that it's still doing extraordinarily well? Why can we not admit that it does not need to be replaced? Why do we need to do this thing where we constantly act as if like the Nintendo is on the verge of releasing the next Nintendo console? Because I can tell you right now, the YouTubers, Review Tech USA, Arlo, RGT85, like those guys, they're making videos right now, or are probably already have made the videos right now, trying to say that like, oh, it's coming out like January 2025 or something, right? It's every single time with these people, they just push back the dates a little bit. Oh, it's not coming back holiday 2024. Oh, it's coming out January 2025, right? Like, oh, they're pushing it back a couple of months because of chip shortages. They're worried about World War III, like that is going to be the legit like excuse for a lot of people, right? Like oh, our leaks were right, but plans change. Arlo made that video claiming that the Switch Pro was a real thing, but it got delayed because of the chip shortage. It was like it got like canceled because of the chip shortage, which is like obviously a load of crap. Like they weren't gonna do something like that, especially since they released the OLED. It's like it's such an absurd concept. It's so ridiculous, and yet they're gonna hang on to this. They're gonna cling on to the whole like Switch successor thing for as long as they possibly can. Because it's like one of the only things that gets them any views or attention, because their content is so unbelievably worthless, right? Right? I can't. I guarantee you we're going to see these people, the analysts, the YouTubers, the shills, NeoGaf, Reset Era. Like, I guarantee you, these guys are going to keep pushing these rumors. They have to, because there's no way that they can't allow Switch to continue dominating the way it is. It has been, because like if this keeps going on, an entire generation of gamers are going to be raised exclusively on Nintendo hardware. And once that happens, the entire myth that like third-party games that like PlayStation, Xbox, PC have like more mature, sophisticated titles for like more experienced gamers. Like it falls apart. Like if people actually play the Nintendo games, they understand that they are superior. The only reason people believe otherwise is if they don't play Nintendo to begin with. If they've never played Nintendo to begin with. Like at the very least, you should be able to acknowledge that, like, yeah, Mario is a good game. Yeah, Pikmin is an interesting franchise. Yeah, Fire Emblem has its audience, right? Like if you're the sort of person who like refuses to admit these IPs even exist, like, if you're the sort of person who every year, like, tries to say that Pokemon is the same thing over and over again when it's clearly not, like, why would I ever take anything you say seriously, right? Why would I respect that? And it's been the same thing for years and years and years. Like Nintendo's greatest critics, the people who like religiously hate Nintendo, who obsessively make content, like they don't play the games. And it couldn't be more apparent. And their audience doesn't play the games. And it couldn't be more apparent. Like you don't see these people actually make like interesting observations about games, like talking about what Twilight Princess did well, right? Because Twilight Princess is a deeply flawed game, right? But it has a lot of merit. I liked the game growing up, but like I had a lot of problems with it. But like the way people talk about that game, they act as if it's like a complete failure. No, it definitely has an audience. It definitely has a fan base. I consider myself a fan of the game, even though it's not like my favorite Zelda game, not by a long shot. Like I certainly grew up playing it and I like it a lot. Like for what it is, like why can't we talk about the positive aspects of Twilight Princess? Why can't we talk about the positive aspects of Tears of the Kingdom or like Fire Emblem Engage or whatever? Like why does everything have to be some grand conspiracy to make every major Nintendo release look like their point? Like why do they have to denounce every game that comes out? Right? Because that was the justification for 2023, was that like Tears of the Kingdom is going to be the last major game on Switch, and then we're going to get the Switch too. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is not a major release. Detective Pikachu Returns, not a re-release. Pokemon DLC, ignore that. Ignore WarioWare, not a major release. Ignore all those games coming out next year. Those aren't major releases. Like Tears of the Kingdom is going to be the last major release on Switch. And it was obviously not true even then. But they stuck by it, and they'll continue saying things like it going forward. More people really need to address that the Nintendo YouTube community has no idea what it's talking about. They can't predict gaming industry trends. They can't predict the success and failure of certain titles. They have no ability to discern whether a game is good or bad, and they have absolutely no idea when a new piece of hardware is going to release. They are completely ignorant as to the inner workings at Nintendo.